Whether you're an experienced MHE driver or simply work in an environment where forklifts are operating, the consequences of a forklift accident can be just as devastating. This short training film will help you to identify some of the common bad practices which can lead to an accident, and will raise awareness of the best practices when working with and around forklifts, reducing the risk of an accident or injury. Parts of this video are designed to be hard-hitting, and we will show footage of real forklift truck accidents. The aim of this isn't just to shock you, but to raise awareness of the serious consequences when FLTs are not operated correctly. There are over 1,000 serious injuries every year involving forklift trucks. In nearly 60% of the cases, the injury is a result of a pedestrian being struck by a forklift truck. As pedestrians working around moving vehicles, there is the risk that you could be involved in a serious incident, and because of this, you need to take responsibility for your actions. Forklift accidents can occur for a variety of reasons. First, let's look at an example of lack of awareness by both the driver and pedestrian. In this scenario, the conditions are good. The floor is dry and in good condition. There is good lighting throughout the work area. There seems to be some type of demarcation, as can be seen from the yellow floor markings. None of these factors prevent the incident from happening. An incident like this one could easily cause serious injury to the pedestrian, including impact injuries from the initial impact, crush injuries from the forklift and load moving over him, pinch entrapment injuries as parts of his body get caught in moving parts of the forklift, abrasion injuries from being dragged under the forklift. In this instance, the injuries were undoubtedly serious, judging by the reaction of the people who witnessed the incident. Ultimately, the driver is at fault here, as he is the one driving with a load obscuring his view. But as a pedestrian, you can help keep yourself and others safe by keeping a safe distance from a lift truck. Point out bad practice to colleagues and to your managers or supervisors. In this next clip, the site looks well organised. The loads are neatly stacked, the floor is in good condition, and the warehouse is well lit. The pedestrian does not pay attention to the forklift. They are looking in the wrong direction, and they do not have any high vis. As with the first clip, the injuries to the pedestrian were undoubtedly serious. But who is at fault? Ultimately, the driver is at fault here, as he is the one driving with a load obscuring his view. Remember, as a pedestrian, take responsibility for yourself. Always keep a safe distance from a lift truck. Point out bad practice to colleagues and to your managers or supervisors. This area appears to be a loading bay. It is well lit, well organised, and the conditions are dry and light with good visibility. Here we can't clearly see the injuries caused, but there will be an impact injury and entrapment injury, as the pedestrian's leg seems to be caught in the wheel arch and wrapped around the wheel. Even though the pedestrians did not anticipate the movement of the forklift, ultimately it's the driver who's at fault, as he is the one driving the forklift and was driving in reverse without carrying out any observation. In this next clip, we are going to see an example of an accident caused by bad operating practice. What do you think is being done incorrectly here? The operator shows poor practice by turning with a raised load, turning with an unbalanced load and a load that is greater than the capacity of the forklift. The consequence of an accident like this could easily be a serious injury or fatality to the driver or to any pedestrian within a 20-metre radius. As well as the physical injuries, people often overlook the possible life changes which may occur following an accident. The financial impact of losing your job or having to do a job which pays less can lead to loss of your house due to not meeting mortgage or rent payments, inability to continue with your hobbies, even affecting your personal relationships like not being able to play with the kids or walk your dog. It's fair to say that the majority of lift truck accidents are completely avoidable. As a pedestrian, you have an important role to play in helping to keep yourself and your colleagues safe. This training video will help you identify bad practice and therefore remove yourself from a potentially dangerous situation, challenge the lift truck operator so they appreciate the risk they are creating, and to communicate instances of bad practice to your supervisor. There are 4 essential areas that all forklift operators and non-forklift personnel need to remember to be safe. We don't expect you to remember every piece of information in this film, but if you remember to stop and think just for a few seconds, this could make a real difference in reducing the risk of accidents and injuries. There are a few subsections under safe working practice. The first is stability. Firstly, you should be aware that every lift truck has a rated capacity plate, which details the maximum weight that a machine will safely lift and at what height. It is extremely dangerous for an operator to lift a load that exceeds the capacity of the lift truck. Operators must always be aware of the weight of the loads. If a load exceeds the capacity of the lift truck, there is a much greater risk of the lift truck tipping over. Here's an example. As can be seen from this example of a capacity plate, as the height of the load increases, the capacity reduces. In other words, the lift truck can lift less weight as the height increases. Now let's work through the basics of what could make a forklift unstable. To do this, we need to understand what is generally termed as the stability triangle. The stability triangle is a line drawn between the 2 front wheels and the rear axle. When the lift truck is not carrying a load, the centre of gravity is to the rear of the lift truck, as shown in this example. A load has its own centre of gravity, also shown in this example. When a lift truck picks up a load, the centre of gravity of the lift truck and the load combine in the centre of the truck. This is the combined centre of gravity. For the lift truck to remain stable and safe, the centre of gravity needs to stay within the stability triangle. Lifting or lowering the load, braking and accelerating, or turning a tight corner, all have an effect on the centre of gravity. When a load is raised, the stability triangle becomes a pyramid. The higher the load is lifted, the higher the centre of gravity. You can see here that the higher the load is lifted, the centre of gravity moves closer to the edges of the stability pyramid. When operating a reach truck and extending the reach, you can see how close the centre of gravity is to the edge of the stability pyramid. That means any actions of bad practice have a much higher risk of the lift truck tipping over. Forklift instability can be caused by a number of factors. The main causes of longitudinal or front-to-back instability are harsh braking and acceleration, undercutting, not heeling the load, live load. A swinging load can move the centre of gravity, causing instability. Ground conditions, for example potholes or debris. If a truck needs to be driven over rail tracks or a drainage gully, always drive over diagonally and slowly. Incorrect load lowering, for example lowering a heavy load, then quickly bringing it to a stop. Incorrect use of tilt, for example increased tilt at height. And finally, overloading, where the weight of the load is too great for the capacity of the truck. We're now going to look at lateral or side-to-side instability. The main causes of lateral instability are turning at speed. It's important to remember that an unladen truck is less stable than a laden truck. If you remember the stability triangle, the center of gravity is central when a truck is laden correctly. Turning with an elevated load, the higher the load is carried, the closer the truck is to the edge of the stability triangle, making the factors that affect stability crucial, such as turning, traveling across an incline, increasing the risk of tip over, carrying a load off center, or flat or damaged tires, causing a truck to tip to one side. Any lift truck is at its most stable when being driven at a sensible speed, on even ground, in a straight line, with a load being carried as low as practically possible, the pallet in contact with the fork heels, and stabilizing back tilt applied. This ensures that the center of gravity is as far back as possible. On a reach truck, the reach should be fully retracted to enable this to be achieved. When driving on sloping ground, there is always an increased risk of tipping over. You should drive slowly and use the brakes gently. Never drive diagonally and do not turn on the incline. Keep your forks as low as possible to reduce the truck's center of gravity and apply back tilt. When driving unladen, your forks should always be facing downhill. Always look in the direction of travel, which means when traveling uphill, you will need to be looking over your shoulder. When you are driving with a load, your fork should always be facing uphill, which means when you're traveling downhill, you will need to be looking over your shoulder. And if your view is obscured by a large load, it is recommended that you use a banksman. The law requires that a seatbelt must be worn whilst operating a counterbalance, pivot steer, telescopic handler or side loader with a lifting capacity of under 10,000 kg. For all other types of lift truck, if a seatbelt is fitted, then it is advisable to wear it, and if it is your company policy, then you must wear it. The only exception is if a very specific risk assessment has been performed under HSE Guidance Note MISC 241. This is a legal requirement, but it's also for your personal safety. A seatbelt on a lift truck is designed to keep the operator within the confines of the cab in the event of a tip over, to prevent them from being crushed by the overhead guard. This is often referred to as the mousetrap. We have now covered the stability element of safe working practice, and you should now understand what makes a forklift stable and unstable. The second element under safe working practice is speed. Wherever you are operating a lift truck, you should always drive at a speed that is appropriate to the environment and conditions and according to the company rules. Increases in traffic, reduced operating space, visibility and ground conditions will all affect your conditions and environment, and therefore your speed should change to suit the situation. You should always drive at a speed that would ensure that you have time to safely react. Avoid fast cornering and harsh accelerating or braking. Reduce your speed and stay in control. The third element under safe working practice is operating area. At the start of each shift, you should always carry out a series of pre-use checks on your lift truck. This complies with the law and also ensures that your equipment remains safe to operate. Any problems should be reported immediately to your manager, and any faulty equipment should not be used until repaired. Before picking up any load, the operator must be aware of the weight of the load and the capacity of the lift truck that they are using. The condition of the load and pallet must be checked to ensure it's safe to lift, to prevent the load from falling off the truck and causing injury or damage. You must also check the dimensions of the load to make sure it's suitable to transport and can safely be unloaded. Make sure that the load is fully heeled, with back tilt applied, and that the forks are not too long and protrude, as this may cause adjacent loads to be dislodged when stacking. As a pedestrian, for your own safety, you should report any load that looks unstable to the driver and your manager. If you were driving your car in rain or snow, you'd slow down and take greater care on the roads, and the same applies to operating a forklift. Something that's encountered more regularly whilst operating a forklift is moving from a dark area to a light area and vice versa, such as entering or exiting a warehouse. In these conditions, the operator needs to give themselves time for their eyes to adjust before continuing with the operation. Whilst operating a lift truck, you should never do anything that would affect your concentration or ability to control the truck. Avoid eating, drinking, using your phone, smoking, or anything else. If you observe any unsafe behavior, you should report this to your manager. Safe parking should be carried out in a safe location where you aren't blocking any doors, especially emergency exits and equipment, or anywhere where it could cause an obstruction, especially pedestrian walkways, as this would force a pedestrian to walk into lift truck traffic areas. The safest position for the truck is on level ground, with the mast tilted forward and fork tips on the ground, the parking brake on, ignition key or fob removed, and on a reach truck, the reach should be fully retracted. Think is all about challenging your own actions and thinking about the consequences of acting or operating dangerously. Just because you have done something 100 times and it's been okay, doesn't mean an accident won't happen the 101st time. Ask yourself, is it really worth it? Whoever you are, whether a driver or pedestrian, you should always challenge your actions and avoid unsafe behaviour. The consequences of a serious accident can be life-changing for those involved and for their family and friends. How would you feel knowing that you had killed or seriously injured your workmate? Could you live with that? Is it really worth cutting a corner? Think about the consequences. All employees have a legal responsibility too, to take care of the health and safety of himself and others who may be affected by his acts or omissions at work. To cooperate with his employer on matters of health and safety. In other words, you must follow your company's policy at all times. Not to misuse or interfere with anything provided in the interests of health and safety. All employees have a duty at work too, to only use work equipment for which he has received training, to only use the equipment in the ways in which he has been trained, and to report any misuse of equipment by colleagues to the employer. If you fail to follow these requirements, then you are breaking the law, and in the case of an accident, you could receive an unlimited fine and up to 24 months prison sentence. Is it worth the misery and cost? Observe encourages you to truly see the environment that you are working in. Are you absorbing what you're looking at or simply going through the motions? The environment around you can change very quickly, which is why we encourage 360 observation. 360 observation is looking all around you before any operation, even if you know there aren't any people in your work area. This makes sure that you will always be operating safely and remain in the habit of carrying out your observations. It only takes one time when you don't look to seriously injure a pedestrian or worse. It's very important that both pedestrians and operators always have clear eye contact to ensure you have been seen. If you see a forklift operating without carrying out observations, you should keep your distance and inform your supervisors, as you are the one at risk of being seriously injured. Blind corners are a high-risk area, and as such, you should take extra care. Make sure you slow down and prepare to stop. Be aware of other pedestrians or vehicles and sound your horn with several short blasts to alert people of your presence. Your company's traffic signs and travel direction must be obeyed for everyone's safety. Clear vision is key to truly observing. You wouldn't drive a car along the road with a bonnet up, so don't drive with a load obstructing your view. In this situation, you should drive in reverse whilst turning in your seat and looking over your shoulder. If you are driving up a slope with a load obscuring your view, you will need to use a banksman. You should always give pedestrians plenty of space, slow down, and give yourself time to safely react. Give pedestrians priority. The outcome of a lift truck impacting a person will always result in an injury. Your company may have a minimum separation distance which you must comply with. When approaching a crossing, slow down and be prepared to stop. Sound your horn to let others know you're there. The lift trucks in your operation may be fitted with visual and/or audio devices, such as flashing beacons or audible reverse systems. If they are fitted to your forklift, then you should use them, giving other people around you the best possible opportunity to see you. If a device isn't working properly, then this should be reported immediately to your supervisor for repair, and depending on the fault, you may need to stop using the truck completely until the repair is completed. It is always possible to hit something overhead with a lift truck, so you must always check before operating that your actions will be safe. You should always make sure that there's plenty of clearance for the mast and load, taking into account any doorways, pipes, cables, sprinkler systems, or CCTV cameras. Pedestrians have just as much a responsibility to act in a safe manner as a driver of a lift truck. It is clearly in the interest of the pedestrian, as they will always be the one that is injured if hit by a lift truck. We will all be a pedestrian at some point, and as such it's worth everyone being aware of the dangers. As a pedestrian, you should wear the correct PPE when in a working area as specified by your employer. High-vis clothing is essential to give you the best possible chance of being seen by the lift truck operators. Remember that your PPE is not a force field that makes you invincible. It's a last resort and should be treated as such. You should stick to any designated walkways, looking both ways at crossings and places where you have to leave the walkway. Making eye contact with a driver ensures that both the pedestrian and driver know that they have seen each other. Lift trucks have many blind spots, so always try to remain in the operator view if they are operating in your vicinity or travelling towards you. Pedestrians should never be carried on a forklift. It is extremely dangerous and not designed for this purpose. Never lift anyone unless there is a purpose-made work platform securely attached to the lift truck and the operator is trained to use this attachment. We don't expect you to remember everything that you've heard today. However, if you take one point away from today, remember to stop and take a second to think about safe working practice. Could the way I'm working be unsafe? Think, what are the consequences and am I prepared to face them? Observe, are you looking and seeing every time? Pedestrians, take responsibility for your own safety and that of the people working around you. Every year, there are over 1,000 serious injuries involving lift trucks.